No! Happy Father's Day, everybody out there. This is Dylan Knows. It is Sunday, June 15th. It is the beginning of my birthday week. My birthday is on June 20th, so please send money. Lots and lots of money, please. I'm begging you. I need money. Please send it. I'll give you the address after the show, I promise. But yeah, happy Father's Day to you all. This is Dylan Knows, my weekly YouTube show. I'm on episode 40 right now, so I've been around for quite a while, which is pretty good. Every week I have a different genre, different guest host. This week, my usual paranormal co-host, Larissa, is taking a little hiatus. She just got back from vacation, and then she's got to move on to doing Wizard World. So I said, hey, you know what? You need to take a break this month. She said, sure. So she's going to take a break. She should be back next month talking more paranormal stuff. But that put me into a little bit of quandary. Like, who am I going to get now to help me out here? Well, I got my friend Cindy, because we're going to be talking about Stephen King. But first, let me introduce Cindy. Cindy, say hello.
Hey, everybody.
How you doing today?
Doing good. How are you?
Not bad, not bad. How's how's the weather out there in Colorado?
A lot cooler than expected. It was supposed to be 90, but we're barely hitting 75.
Oh, that's good. We're going to be getting
Winter's on its way.
Yeah, yeah, it's coming.
Another one. Mm-hmm.
We're going to be hitting the 90s here in Maryland, middle of the week. So it's a beautiful day today, beautiful day yesterday. So live it up while we can. So we're going to be doing today's topic is Cindy is a really big Stephen King fan. I'm a pretty big Stephen King fan. He has written a number of novels, a lot of which are paranormal in an aspect and stories. So I figured, you know what, it'd be the perfect opportunity to discuss something a little bit different. But for fans of the paranormal show, don't worry. I do have some news of the weird that we'll go over real quick, because there's some interesting things that happened this week, or this month, I should say, since the last episode. So we'll go over this real quick. Also, I've got the Q&A feature up on Google+, so if you're watching via Google+, go ahead, make any comments you want. If you say stuff that I deem racist or disgusting, you will be blocked. And if just write whatever you want, and I might not get to every single one of them, but I will try my best. Like right now, our friend Barry says he's here, so hi Barry. Thanks for joining us. So, first up, this is the Paranormal Show. Before we get into the Stephen King aspect of it, we will be doing some of the news of the weird real quick, and I'm just gonna, get your take on it, Cindy, if you want. The big news in the paranormal this past month is the TV show Ghost Hunters on Sci-Fi had a little bit of drama a couple weeks ago, where crew members Amy Bruni and Adam Berry have said that they will not be back on the show for the new season. And that they are moving on to spend more time with their families. But a mysterious tweet by Jason Hawes, the co-creator and the guy who runs Ghost Hunters, had more of a stinging aspect to it, that it seemed more along the lines that Amy and Adam were holding out for more money. So it's kind of a, a he said, she said type of thing. You really don't know who you should believe or not believe, or you could say maybe they did want more money and Adam and Amy are taking the high road and not saying, we left because we wanted more money, but Jason, in his maybe hurt feelings or whatever, feels that they are deserting him due to the fact that he's not paying them enough. So I don't know, but there's that issue going on right now. But Dustin Perry, who is a favorite, who was a previous Ghost Hunter and then left the show and joined up with Ghost Hunters International for a little while, and then he quit that as well. Well, he didn't quit that. They sort of canceled it on him, so he was moving on to do motivational speaking. He's coming back on to help, solidify things for the next season and get to the next group of people to come in that Jason can bring in to replace Amy and Adam. So for fans of Dustin Perry, check out Ghost Hunters' new season. I think it's going to be coming out maybe August. New season's coming out then. Cindy, do you ever watch any of the Ghost Hunter shows?
I've seen a few episodes of it. I don't know it real well, but quite often you see people like that end up coming back when it's over money. So that'll be interesting to see if that happens.
It would be interesting. I mean, it's one of the things that I guess maybe gets in your blood after a while, and you just can't stay away from it. But I mean, I can understand, because they're going all over the country. They're not just staying in specific areas. They are spending a lot of time away from their families. I can understand that aspect of it, but it it just seemed a lot like sour grapes to me, with Jason tweeting something about that being money. You know, he could have taken the high road as well and kept it in-house and said, okay, it was a dispute over money, because Amy and Adam weren't just saying, you know, Ghost Hunter sucks, you're terrible, they'll treat us right now. They just said, we want to spend more time with our family. It just seemed like he was being a little bit of sour grapes, but we'll see. Ghost Hunters has started to show a little bit of a decline, because sci-fi is starting to get less and less. They're getting more and more away from the reality paranormal shows. They've already canceled Ghost Hunters International, Ghost Collector, or Haunted Collector, Haunted Collector, and a bunch of the other, Destination Truth, a bunch of the other really popular ones are no longer on there. So it seems like they're getting away from that. So Ghost Hunters has been around for 10 years, and maybe it's just starting to decline now. So maybe this is just maybe going to be the final nail in the coffin. I don't know. Speaking of coffins, they found the grave, or the coffin rather, of Vlad the Impaler, who a lot of people say was the influence of Dracula, or could have been a vampire. You know, was like someone that, you know, Bram Stoker looked at and pretty much said was Dracula, was Vlad the Impaler. I guess they say it in the book that he was Vlad the Impaler, but they found his burial site just recently over in Italy. So that's a interesting aspect. Nothing supernatural about that, but still the fact that, you know, he's been known to be considered to be like a Dracula type, and they found his coffin, so that's kind of interesting. Something pretty interesting that came up a couple weeks ago was a great white shark was killed in the waters around Australia by what people believe is a creature bigger than the great white shark, which is not really known. It's a mysterious type of beast. They don't know what it is. They don't know what could have caused the damage to this great white shark. It reminds me a lot of, there was a book written, I think, by a guy by the name of Robert Alden, I think, called Meg, which was about a megalosaur, which was a dinosaur shark type creature that is discovered in present day, and it's sort of like a Jaws story, but it's about this giant shark who's a lot tougher than a great white. And there's some theories and not conspiracies, but some ideas that this creature, it might have been a beast that they've never seen before, because, you know, great white sharks are not easy pickings. I mean, you don't just, you know, you can't just, you know, take them out, right? So it's got to be something big. So who knows what it could have been, and that's to be continued, I guess. UFO sightings continue to be on the rise in the town of Hinckley. I'm not exactly sure what that is. I think that might be England, but they've become definitely a UFO hotspot recently. And finally, kind of good time to talk about this story with the World Cup. You know, people are watching the World Cup. You know, soccer or football, if you want to call it, from European football. There was footage of a ghost running through the field during a German Cup final that went viral. So it's just a little shadow, and you just see it, and it sort of dissipates. None of the other players notice it, but it just happened to show up on this camera. So that's kind of interesting. And it's the second such sighting of like a spirit that was filmed in a soccer / football stadium. There was one on my last show that I talked about, which was shown running through the stands of a soccer / football match. So the ghosts seem to like football, soccer as well, and they have World Cup fever too. So
was it only one camera that caught it?
Yeah, it was the main, the main TV camera. I think they just took that. So it could have been a problem in the camera as well, a shadow or something. But it's some interesting stuff. But it went viral, and the fact that, you know, they call it a ghost because it's got that formless, shapeless type of thing, and nobody seems to react to it. So it's kind of interesting.
Oh, yeah.
So that's the news of the weird. Not a lot of stuff actually going on, but that's okay. Also, real quick before we get into it, I just discovered this today. This doesn't really have anything to do with paranormal, but Casey Kasem, the voice of Shaggy, American Top 40 as well, has passed away. He's been having some issues, health issues, family issues lately, and so he has passed away. So thoughts with his family. And also, I was going to talk about this later, but I figured may as well connect it to this. Ruby Dee passed away earlier this week. She's an actress who actually was Mother Abigail in the TV version of The Stand. So she does have this connection to Stephen King that we're going to be discussing now. So it's kind of interesting. And I also discovered today that Stephen King's first novel, Carrie, came out in 1974, which is 40 years. So it's, once again, circumstances worked out for Dylan Knows, where unknowingly I've come up with a pretty interesting story, interesting show idea. That, 40 years, not bad. So let's get into that then, because that's why you're here, Cindy.
Right.
So tell me, I've been monopolizing this show. Let me tell us a little bit about your love of Stephen King and how you got into it, and reasons why you like reading Stephen King.
My love of Stephen King. Well, I saw Carrie in the theater with all my friends when I was a teenager, or I mean when I was about 30. No, 5. We go the right way there. No, not really. No, like I was kind of telling you earlier, it's my love of him is because you can think back to a book you read, and the exact moment maybe you read part of the story, like with Pet Sematary. I read when I got to the part where Gage got hit by the truck, and in his book he describes the father reaching out, and he could feel the little boy's hair on his fingertips right when he was hit by the truck, and I just took that book and threw it across the room, and I couldn't pick it up and read it. I couldn't finish it. I saw the movie when it came out, which was totally different, of course, but it made me mad and affected me, and I can still remember that, and that's been years and years. And I can remember where I lived. I can remember what room I was in when I was reading it. So how many people can do that to us? It just stays with you for life. And then it rolls over into his next story, and then his next story, and it's just amazing. Amazing the way it affects us.
It's a fantastic author, and what I like about him also is because, originally he might have been considered as just a horror/thriller writer, but he's also branched out into a whole bunch of other aspects. He's done some nonfiction books. He's written what I truly believe is probably his, to coin a music phrase, his magnum opus is probably the Dark Tower saga.
Right.
That's more of it has some horror aspects to it, from what I believe, because I haven't read any of the Dark Tower, but it's got that fantasy horror aspect as well. But he's able to write in a different style, and then he's recently been doing a lot more like crime thriller dramas as well, and still sticking with the supernatural here and there, and time travel and stuff like that. So he's been writing for so long now that he's able to branch out and do different things, and he pretty much does an excellent job in all the different genres, and that's one of the reasons why I like him. I mean, we picked him for today because most of his stuff is paranormal and horror, but not everything is,
Right.
And I agree with you. I mean, some of those stories, that's a sign of a good writer, when something like that scene you said about Pet Sematary, when it sticks with you, it gets into you, and it sucks you out. It sucks you in. That's the sign of an excellent writer. And Stephen King is an excellent writer. Does he have his problems? Sure. All writers have their issues, I personally think maybe one of his weaknesses is, not every time, but he seems to have trouble ending books sometimes. He's got really big ideas and theories and ways that he wants to write, and really great ideas, and he builds it up, and then the ending is just sort of like a poof.
It just dies. Yeah. That's true.
I can't be easy to be a writer, but and to have that be a weakness, it's not enough. I don't think that people are going to say, this is a terrible ending, I'm never going to read another one of his books again, because he does such a good idea. He's such a great writer that even if the ending is a little weak, the leading up to the ending is absolutely brilliant.
Right.
Let me see. So what was the first Stephen King book you ever read? Was it Carrie, or was it something else?
First one I ever read, I believe it was Carrie, and I didn't read it long before the movie actually came out. So I actually remember the movie more. I'm more visual, and I love movies, so I will watch more movies than I will read books. But back in the day, I did read a lot of King books. Those are pretty much the only books I bought, actually. So, yeah.
No, I know what you mean, because I went through a period there where I guess it was right around the time after I loved Stand By Me. Then Misery came out very soon after that, and it got to a point where there was just and that's one of the interesting things about him also, is that he doesn't mind selling the rights to all of his stories, and in some cases he really honestly doesn't care how it's perceived on the screen.
Right.
He has some issues with some stuff, which we'll get into in a little bit, but the majority of them, he as soon as he writes a book, the next thing you hear about is, okay, it's being optioned for a film, and sometimes the film gets made, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it goes to TV, it makes a film miniseries, a TV miniseries, sometimes it's a completely different style from the book, sometimes they take the most obscure little short story he's written in a short story collection and turn it into a movie. You know, ones like The Lawnmower Man, you know, I think he had a hand in that, and the one about the not graveyard shift, the giant creatures under the stairs or something like that. I can't remember the name of it. It was another interesting movie that it wasn't one of his big novels. It was one of his short stories. So
and Thinner.
Yeah.
Started out that way. God, what else? Well, and he also did the Bachman books, which there again, like you were saying, would be totally different scope of what he normally wrote.
Yeah, like The Running Man. Yeah, that's Bachman right there, and that's also something interesting as well, that he needed to create a pseudonym to try a different style of writing, because I think that was early on in his career where he was mostly known for, you know, like Carrie and Christine and Cujo and Pet Sematary and Salem's Lot and The Shining and stuff like that. So they were all horror, paranormal aspects, and he wanted to branch out and try something different, but I think maybe he didn't think that his fans would follow him or appreciate it. So, you know, Bachman's born, and he writes, you know, Rage and some of the other ones also. The Long Walk, I guess, is another one, and Running Man, obviously. And eventually, it was leaked out. Okay, this is Stephen King, and Bachman books became as popular as Stephen King because it's pretty much the same style of writing. I mean, it's his strength is character. He builds characters really well. He creates characters, interesting characters, and he has interesting ideas, interesting scenarios in his head, and throws them at the characters to see how they react. And some of the ideas he has maybe a little bit out there. Sometimes, as we said before, you know, halfway through a book it derails. A good example of that is Insomnia. Have you read Insomnia?
Yes.
Yeah.
I love Insomnia. I love the idea of little people running around with scissors, and that's a good explanation, right? That would give you true fact of how people die. So I really like that part of it. And honestly, when it got toward the end, I don't even know if I finished that book.
Yeah.
The truth, because of the fizzle.
He sort of lost me on it because I found the little people cutting the souls or the thread of life out of you. I found that absolutely interesting. And then he boomerangs into a anti-abortion terrorist guy who wants to crash an airplane, I think, into a stadium filled with right to choose rally or something like that, and it just sort of, if you would have maybe just excised that part of the story out, it would have been a really good, interesting paranormal thriller that could be considered one of your tops. But he had to cushion it a little bit, and he came up with this other story. And maybe he wanted to make a comment about life and the way it is and stuff like that, and decided to spew it into that. So I mean, and that's okay. I mean, he's a writer. He can do whatever he wants to do. It's his forte. It's his characters, and people are going to buy it. I mean, Stephen King is one of the most popular writers out there today. He's got hundreds of books out there, and is going to continue to write, which was almost in question a few years ago. I mean, he was talking about retiring after his accident. Yeah, but
see, and that reminded me a lot of Kingdom Hospital that he wrote before he had that accident, and which was a great book. I absolutely loved the book. And then when they did it on TV, it was like a joke, where it was so scary and interesting and superstitious and all that stuff in the book, but the movie just tore it apart. It could have been it wasn't a movie. I believe it was a TV series.
TV series, yeah.
It could have been a really good TV series, And then The Dark Half. That's another one where I wonder if he's almost referring to himself. Is that what can happen to a writer? And I love Timothy Hutton in that movie, so it's another favorite.
Yeah, those are and I think that's what it was. I think he wrote The Dark Half as a way to talk about Bachman in a different way, and it's an idea he has. Is like, okay, what, and that's it just shows how a writer comes up with their ideas. Something that happens in their regular life. I have a pseudonym I've written under before. People know it's me now, so there's really no reason to have a pseudonym anymore because everybody knows it's me. So why should I write under this guy's name again? So he kills off Richard Bachman. I think Dark Half was his way of coming to terms with that, I guess. And then even Bachman didn't stay dead that long. I mean, he discovers a couple more books and publishes them under the Bachman name, like The Regulators, and I think there was another one also in there. And that leads me to something else. So The Regulators was a Bachman book that came in after Bachman had passed away. But what's interesting about his writing also, which I love about him too, is he refers to his other books in his books, He refers to locations or characters or situations. And that's sort of like what The Regulators did, because he released The Regulators the same time as Desperation. And it's basically, it's the same characters and sort of the same setup, but a little different. I mean, The Regulators was about a neighborhood being controlled by a demon inside of a child, and Desperation was about a ghost town that was under the control of a demon who was inhabiting a sheriff who had kidnapped a bunch of people, and the only way to save the day is through a kid who had the same name as the kid who was being possessed by the demon.
Right.
So, and that's the reason why he released them, and I remember that he released them simultaneously. So you had two Stephen King books. I mean, one was Stephen King, one was Richard Bachman, but they came out the same time using the same characters and kind of a similar theme throughout, and people ate it up. It was great, and that's another thing about him too, is he goes for that thing. So he releases two books at the same time, and then with The Green Mile, he releases them in a serial edition, in little, each chapter or whatever was maybe each section was a little book. I remember that because I bought every one of those, and it was like almost like a monthly schedule. He would say, okay,
right,
yeah, this month, the second part of the series come out, and then the third part, and the fourth part, and so you could read it. It was easier to digest. It was maybe about 50 to 100 pages long, and you could ride right through that, and then you're like, oh man, he ended like on a cliffhanger. I want to know what happens. So then he kills you. Then the next month it comes out, you rush out there, you grab the next chapter, and you read that one also, and then it just keeps going, and he reels you in that way, and that's fantastic. And he's got two books coming out this year. Mr. Mercedes just came out.
Right, I saw that
last week. Yeah, which is actually, it was interesting. Once again, is the Baltimore Sun. I was reading this morning in the Baltimore Sun in the art section. They had a book review of Mr. Mercedes. So that was kind of interesting, convenient as well.
So what did they say about it? Because it looks really interesting.
They loved it. The guy loved it. I mean, he's going back to thriller territory. So it's not one of his paranormal horror ones, but he says everything you like about King is in there. The characters, the storyline is good, and he says it's the reviewer was like, it is a fantastic book. It's really good, and I think this reviewer didn't like Dr. Sleep all that much, which came out last year. So he was like, this is a better improvement over Dr. Sleep. So we got Mr. Mercedes coming out, which is sort of his thriller. And then he's got he's going back to paranormal with Revival, which is coming out in November. He hasn't really said much about it, but that's coming out in November. So he's got two books coming out this month or this year as well. And then on top of that, next week or in 2 weeks, King Under the Dome comes back on a TV for its second season.
Wait.
So he's not going anywhere. He's sticking around. And then they also even had another book that he wrote scheduled for 2015. So he's got another book coming out in 2015. So he's got.
That's amazing.
Yeah, he's just churning them out and doing really good. And that's another good thing about him, is that he does that. He keeps writing, but he also does a bunch of different other things as well. He wrote and directed a movie, Maximum Overdrive. Did you see that one?
Yes. Emilio Estevez is in that movie.
Yeah. So. What'd you think about that one?
That was interesting. That was scary on a different level. Because how often are you just walking through a parking lot and you think of, well, I do, especially at night, not maybe cars turning on and off, but werewolves or ghosts or just something that's going to grab you as you pass by a bush. So that's kind of how that was, because they were trapped. And at the same time, it didn't make sense at all. So that's what was funny about it. So yeah, I'm the other one that really liked it. So there.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I just, the only thing I remember about it was the giant Green Goblin mask on the truck. It's like the whole thing is the Green Goblin from Spider-Man, and I think Doug Close, one of the guys we've had conversations with on Twitter about Stephen King, said someone once he watched it, he's like, "What's King said something like he was totally on drugs when he made the film. He had no idea what he was doing." So that's kind of interesting about that.
And he can still make money.
Oh yeah. You just put Stephen King's name on it, you're guaranteed something, you know.
Yeah.
That's why you get all these movies, and not necessarily all of them are good, but I mean, he's, you know, not everyone, but most of his books, in some shape or another, have either been released as a movie, a TV series, a TV show, or is in pre-production. So, and I guess it says a lot about him as a writer, because not only is he a popular writer, but he's got stories that people find interesting, and that's what it is. That's one of his major strengths, is the character and the stories that he does.
Right.
So,
like the Dark Towers, but you haven't read those, you said?
Yeah, I haven't read the Dark Tower stories. So what
they're in talks. They're in talks for that to become a series. So I know who I would pick to play Roland, but I always wonder what other people think, because I think Andrew Lincoln. Yeah, but if you haven't read it, then you don't know what I mean. No, you remember that when you do read it.
I will. He'll be. It's one of those that I have the Gunslinger. I tried reading it, but for whatever reason, I couldn't get into it. But this is a while back, because as I was telling you, there was a phase there from like the late '80s or early '90s or whatever, till about maybe after I graduated from college, where that's all I read was Stephen King books. I went to bookstores. I bought every Stephen King book I could think of. I got tons of them, and I read a bunch. I read a lot of them. I read a whole lot of them. I think I made a list of all the ones I read. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, like 15 books right off the top of the head that I can remember that I read of his, and then I read like 3 or 4 of his short story collections, which I really, really like, because once again, he can write the novel. He can write the long-form epic. He can also write short story, and he can write nonfiction. He can do everything. One of my absolute favorite Stephen King books ever is On Writing, which is his nonfiction book about how to write. And it is, if you are interested in being a writer, I highly recommend you read it.
That's the book for people, huh?
It's absolutely it's brilliant. I mean, it starts off with, and it's weird. He's sort of, the first half of the book is just, he's sort of doing like I don't know if it's a real biography of his life or sort of like a faux biography of his life, but talking about his, I think it's probably more along the lines of a real biography, because he focuses on why he got into writing, how he might get his ideas, you know, stuff that he sees in love, but it's written almost like a novel. The first half of the book is, but it's, you know, it's a biography. He refers to himself as I and me and stuff like that. So in the first person, and talks about, I guess he has a brother. He talks about his brother and stuff like that. And so like the first half of the book is just, it's almost like a biography of Stephen King, and his interest in writing, how he got into that. And then the second half of the book is all of his rules on how to write successfully. And you know, and he starts off right away by saying, look, you write how you write, okay? I can't tell you how to write, okay? You write how you write. It's like telling an artist, you do art the way you do art. There's people who are going to be out there telling you this is one way you can do art, and he's basically saying that this is one way you can do writing, but this is one way that if you want to be a successful writer, or maybe what book agents are looking for, is you might want to focus on these aspects. He's not saying you have to do this. He's saying you might want to focus on this. You might want to, you know, not use, like, I think it was like, don't use prepositions at the beginnings of sentences or something like that. Don't ask questions, you know, and don't over-describe things, you know. And he even says, you know, I'm not trying to be hypocritical. I have issues where I sometimes over-describe some things, or I do stuff, and that's fine for my style of writing, but a lot of book agents might find that to be a little off-putting, you know. So basically, he gives you how he sees that, you know, from his experience dealing with book agents and getting books published. This is what they're looking for, okay? But at the same time, he's saying, but I cannot tell you how to write. He says the first rule you need to do to write is just write, okay? Just sit down and just write. It doesn't matter if you follow the rules, just get whatever's on your head and just spit it out on the page, write it all out. And then, because writing is a process, and they said it's very rare that a first draft gets printed. It's very rare, he says, very, very rare that a first draft actually gets printed and sent out. So you just, the hardest part about writing is get that first draft out of your head. It's all congealing in your head, it's all in your head. Just spit it out. Write it down. Doesn't have to be coherent. Doesn't have to make sense. That's what editing is for. You know, just get your ideas down, write it, and then go back, read it yourself. Have someone you trust read it, like a wife, a husband, a brother, sister, mother, father, whatever. Have them, a best friend, whatever. Have them look at it also, and they'll be supportive. I mean, if it's a piece of crap, they're not going to tell you it's a piece of crap. Probably they'll tell you, okay, this is great, but you might, they're going to try to be very nice to you. Mm-hmm. And he says you can't get into that mindset. You can't think that you're the greatest writer of all time. And then you send it off to the book editors. You know, you might take, they might have some ideas for you to do stuff, but you send your first draft out to a book editor or whatever. They'll read it and they'll come back with corrections. You know, can you do this? Can you change this? Whatever. And that's where the process of writing continues. It's a process. It's gonna continue on and on. So it's a very interesting book. So if you're interested in writing, I highly recommend you buy Stephen King's book on writing. It is one of the best nonfiction books that he's written, and it's a very good piece of advice. I got it on my shelf back there. I've read it a couple times. It's that good. It's a quick read, and he's not condescending. He's not saying I'm the best writer in the world. He says this is how I write, and I've been successful with it. But he also keeps saying you don't have to follow these rules. These are just what people might be looking for. And the main thing is, get the idea written down and read a lot of other books. Read a lot of other styles so that you can see how other people write and find your own style. Don't ape somebody else's style. So he's got some good words of wisdom for that. But where we go? So I'm jumping all over the place here.
You're fine.
But with Stephen King, I mean, there's really nothing you can't really go chronologically and say, okay, let's start talking about Carrie on up to Mr. Mercedes. You can jump around like this. I asked you what your first book was. I remember distinctly my first Stephen King book. I also have a copy of it right here. Is Needful Things. It's the very first one I ever read of his. And the reason why I read it, because just like you, I'm a movie person. I love visual. I'm very visual also. I like watching movies. Movies is one of my favorite things to do. I saw Stand By Me, I saw Misery, and I absolutely love those movies. And both of them were directed by Rob Reiner. Now, Rob Reiner has named his production company Castle Rock, which is based on one of the locations that Stephen King writes about. And I read in the newspaper that Stephen King has a new novel out called Needful Things. Rob Reiner's Castle Rock has already bought the rights to it. They're going to make it into a movie. So I was like, okay, another Rob Reiner version of Needful Things. And so maybe I should read it first before I watch the movie, because I like to do that also. So I went out. It was the very first Stephen King book I bought. I read it. I loved it. And then Rob Reiner didn't direct it. And then from what I heard, it was almost completely different. Not completely, but there were a lot of changes from the book into the film, which is something that's going to happen. I mean, I've talked about it before. There really is no way to do an almost direct adaptation of a novel onto film. I mean, I would love to see it done sometime, but for whatever reason, there hasn't really. There might have been a couple out there, but you don't really see it. There's always something different. Even in the Harry Potter series, they've made a few changes, excised storylines. Change characters a little bit, not focus as much on some characters that were in the book. So you're never going to get like a clear adaptation of something, because I guess you really can't do it. That kind of disappointed me though, because I absolutely love Needful Things. It's a great story, and it's billed as the last Castle Rock story. So and it's true. Castle Rock basically gets destroyed in in the book. So, but I
love Castle Rock.
He's a lot of stories set there. I mean, but I love the cover. I mean, you really can't really see it too well, but it's like a twilight, and then here's the Needful Things store, and there's this menacing shadow sticking out of the door. It's such a great cover for the book, and a great idea too. A store opens up in the middle of this town, and you go inside, and it just happens to have the absolute perfect thing you want or need. And the prices are reasonable at first, but then, and I'll spoil it a little bit, and then you begin to realize that the guy who runs it is technically the devil for the most part. You're selling your soul to the devil to get something you really, really like.
Yeah.
That's the premise of it. So, but yeah, that was the first one I really read fully from beginning to end. Didn't see it, didn't see the movie first or whatever. I read the book first, and it got me hooked. The characters were interesting. And refer back, actually, Kiefer Sutherland's character in Stand By Me is in this book. He has a role in this book, so he comes back and makes an appearance in this book. Once again, King taking characters from other stories and putting them in his other books as well. And that's a big thing about the Dark Tower from what I heard, right? I mean, there's a lot of allusions to the Dark Tower in almost all of his books in some form or another, right?
Right, and there is so much information throughout those books that, I mean, it's mind-boggling even trying to remember or keep up with all of it. So how they would make that into a movie or even a TV series and not take 10 years to explain it would be amazing. And he even said, I remember reading right after the Gunslinger, at the end of the Gunslinger, that he said he didn't know when that story would end. So, which I believe it's either 7 or 9 books altogether, but very detailed.
Yeah, I mean, I think what happened was he had his accident, and he still hadn't completed. He had, I think he was going to try to go for 8 books, I think, and he hadn't completed the Dark Tower saga, and a lot of the fans were worried about him. But then you start thinking, okay, once he started recovering, like, is he ever going to finish up the Dark Tower? And that's something also that a lot of people are afraid of with George R.R. Martin. He's getting along in age. He's taken so long to finish Game of Thrones that a lot of fans of Game of Thrones are afraid that he's not going to finish the story, and they're going to be left hanging, and that's sort of similar. What sort of happened with him is that a lot of fans, after the initial shock of him almost dying,
right,
maybe not being able to write again, that they're never going to find the closure for the Dark Tower. And then I think from what I do a lot of reading. I might not have read the books, but I read a lot of articles about them and stuff like that, so I know a little bit about them. When he actually did do it, he wrote the last 2 like almost back to back and released them, so that if something like that ever happened again, he could have a distinct ending to his Dark Tower story, and that would satisfy the people. And so it did, and from what I read is it didn't quite satisfy everybody. A lot of people thought it ended kind of ambiguously, maybe is the proper word for it. Once again, one of maybe King's weaknesses is that he builds it up to this point, and then basically from what I heard, it ends so ambiguously that it's like, okay, this is it. I mean, we get some sort of closure, but at the same time, there's this other aspect that something else is going on.
You kind of have to wonder, a story like that or Game of Thrones, is it ever really over? I mean, it's not like they die and they have this concrete ending with them. I mean, in their mind, has the story ever really ended? So.
That's a very good point. And then, sure enough, recently, I think a couple of years back, everyone was like, whoa, wait a second, there's another Dark Tower book that just came out? And he says, oh, it's slotted in between book 4 and 5 or something like that. But still, he wrote another full book of the Dark Tower story. Right. So obviously, he's got more stories he wants to tell. And that's a good point. I think he just wanted to end it, just in case something happened to him. He dies. He ends up, saying, has another accident, or he just can't write anymore. He wants to give the fans of the Dark Tower their clear-cut ending. And it might not be the ending they like, but at least he feels comfortable enough with the idea, okay, we're done, stop.
Yeah.
But and again, maybe that's why he left it ambiguously open. Maybe then he could say, you know what, I do have some other stories I want to tell. maybe I can get them done, Yeah. And if something happens to me and I don't finish it, it's no big deal,
Yeah, he's kind of like, I told you guys it can't end. I told you. So, yeah, he adds more to it. But it's a massive story. I could see it's kind of like telling the story of someone's entire life. You can't just end it somewhere until they're honestly gone. But then they usually have family that have followed on. So, how do you end something like that?
and in itself, then it would be interesting to follow along with what his family does as you go further into time, and maybe how things are changing in the world and stuff like that. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It's like a never-ending saga, which is good. So you've got a concrete ending, but there's still that option, I guess, that you can open it up a little more. Barry actually has a very interesting question that I think we can get into now, because I know you more of the visual, and I'm more of the movie thing. We can talk a lot about the Stephen King movies now, because I have a distinct opinion about this. Barry is asking, what are your opinions on the Kubrick version of The Shining, and did the book translate to film in your opinion? I'm gonna let you take your take on that, Cindy, and then I'll let you know my version of it. But what's your opinion on that, Cindy? Did you see the Kubrick version?
Yes, and that I actually like it better than the remake. I liked the original Shining. I don't like God, what's her name? She was on the Popeye movie.
Yeah, I know who you mean.
I had her yesterday.
Oh.
Shelley Duvall.
Shelley Duvall, yes.
See, I don't enjoy watching her work, so that's the one thing I didn't like about that movie. But all the rest of it, the blood coming out of the elevator, the twins in the hallway, that big huge kitchen, even just walking through it, just seeing that kitchen was spooky in itself, and the freezer and those kind of things. So I actually really like that one better than the remake that came out.
Now, had you read The Shining, the novel, before you saw it, or after, or have you read it?
After. I read part of it after. So, it's hard to read a book once you've seen the movie, or it is for me. So I read part of it, so there may be things I don't understand as far as that version of the book is.
I'm probably going to get killed here, but I'm not a big fan of Stanley Kubrick. I know, and I'm a big film guy. I'm a big film guy, but to be honest, I think he's up there as one of the most overrated directors of our time. 2001 is a good story, but I find it very boring.
Right.
Because, yes, at the time, I understand 1968, it's amazing to see the spaceships, how they are actually spiraling in real time, going from the Earth to the moon, and you've got the classical music playing and all this stuff, and just sort of like, okay. For me, I need something more than that. It's visually stunning, yes, and that's the thing that Kubrick's good at, is his visuals. Like you said, the giant kitchen, the twins, the blood, the freezer, everything about The Shining that he did. But I do not like 2001. I do not like The Shining. I saw the movie before I read the book. The Shining was one of those, as I told you, where I had my phase where I was reading nothing but Stephen King. I went back, I read some of his older stuff. Shining was one of the first ones I read. And I love the book. The book is fantastic. It's spooky, it's scary, and it gets in your head a little bit. And I didn't like how Kubrick did it. He made some slight changes, nothing too major, but slight changes. And basically what it looks like to me is that Kubrick took the idea of The Shining and made his own haunted hotel movie. And that's fine. That's fine if you want to do it that way and call it Stanley Kubrick's The Overlook,
right,
which is basically, what it's based on. I mean, that's how Stephen King came up with the idea. I mean, The Overlook out in Colorado, I think it's Colorado, right? The Overlook,
right.
Your way? Yeah. It's considered to be one of the most haunted hotels in the country, maybe even the world. And that's where Stephen King came up with the idea for, The Shining. He stayed in, I think, the haunted room, and he experienced. There is like one haunted room there. He stayed in the room where he had a ghostly encounter, and so he used part of that for some of, I think, was it room 214? I think is the or 241 or something like that. It's one of those scary things as well. So there's that, and then the aspect of the idea of he was staying at the Overlook right before it shut down for the season, and he started thinking, it was like, what would it be like for somebody to be in this hotel that you cannot get to during the winter because it's up in the mountains. Snow comes down, they got blizzards, stuff like that. It's hard for cars to get up there, so they just shut down the hotel for visitors, but you still need somebody there to make sure it doesn't collapse, that it keeps running, so that by the time the thaw happens, you'll be able to dust it up, clean it up, and you won't have to do a lot of work to get it ready for people to come in. So he took that idea and he ran with it, and it's such a great psychological story. To me, and it might be because I don't like Kubrick. Maybe that's where where I'm getting colored a little bit, and maybe I need to see The Shining again because I saw it a while back, and I haven't seen it since because I didn't like it. Maybe I need to see it with a fresh pair of eyes again, and that's the thing I've noticed a lot also is that something you see when you're younger might be different now that you're older, you know, and maybe that's what I need to do. Maybe I need to look at The Shining with a new set of eyes. Maybe I had read too much about how Stephen King himself hated the version that Stanley Kubrick did, and I was like, well, yeah, it's your character, Steve. You know, you have a right to hate it. So you know what, Stanley Kubrick. Yeah, I hate it as well because the writer who created the characters hate it. But and as I said, maybe it's my not hatred, but my dislike of Stanley Kubrick that's coloring my opinion a little bit. Maybe it was
yeah, I would agree with that because I hate Tarantino.
I mean, thank you.
Why anybody watches his movies? Him and Tim Burton, hate him. I'm like, really? Why would anybody pay to go see either one of their movies? They're not real directors. But then you hear other people talking about Pulp Fiction. I'm like, one of the worst movies ever. So I can totally relate to what you're saying.
I'm going to agree and disagree with you. I hate second half career Tim Burton. I hate what he's doing now. But the last great movie that I found he did was Big Fish. I absolutely love Big Fish. I love Sleepy Hollow. I loved Ed Wood. And I love Beetlejuice. But yeah, some of the stuff he's been doing now absolutely is horrible. It's like you need to get a new shtick, Tim. I'm sorry. I used to love Tim Burton. Now I don't like him that much anymore. But he still has enough in the tank from his previous work that I like. Tarantino is up there again as one of my highly overrated directors. Pulp Fiction was good, but it just kind of it isn't. I didn't think it was as great as everybody made it out to be. He's made some good movies, but every one of his films to me seems like they're total overreactions that overrated. Everybody says how great they are, and I'm not a big fan of Tarantino. And once again, yeah, maybe that's what it is. Maybe we're coloring our hatred, our dislike of these people is coloring our view of it. It's possible, but to me, it's just granted, I saw The Shining before I read it, but I preferred the book to the movie. I just found it to be a little more off-putting. And once again, maybe I need to go back and look at it again, and maybe I'll look at it with fresh eyes. But that's a good point. So hopefully, Barry, that answers your question. Anything else? You want to talk about The Shining?
No.
The miniseries version was weak. Yeah, it was. I'll give you that also. I mean, Steven Weber was did not have the crazy quality you needed, like a Jack Nicholson.
He's not as strong an actor as Jack Nicholson.
And Rebecca De Mornay at the same time, she's just one of those actresses who's sort of, just there. She has no gravitas or whatever. And the kid was pretty good, but you can't make the whole movie about that. And it was a lot more true to the book. But yeah, the book itself, you can't direct, not theme, what's the word I'm thinking? You can't direct environment or something like that. When you're reading it, there's just a feeling of dread and just buildup of suspense, and it's kind of creepy and scary, and because you're reading it in your head, and you're seeing it how they're seeing it, and the way Stephen King writes it. And then you see it up on screen, and you don't have that same quality because everything is laid out to you. You know what's behind the door. You know that there is a dead woman in the bathtub, a ghost of dead woman is in the bathtub, and she's going to come out and grab you, and that Jack's going to go crazy, and that's all going to happen. So it's good. Did you read Dr. Sleep though? Did you read that one? Have you read that?
No,
one?
I've never read that. I've never read that.
That was the one that he put out last year, which is the sequel to The Shining, which follows the boy Danny Torrance, who has shining power now as a grown-up, and he has his power is still there, but he also had the alcoholism that his father suffered through, and he sort of pushed his shining powers out of his head, but he cleans himself up and begins to reassert himself with The Shining and ends up trying to help people who have similar powers that he has, and then he has to deal with a being who wants to suck out his power and empower kids, stuff like that. So it's a pretty interesting thing. But if you like The Shining, it's a pretty good follow-up to The Shining. So that's good. But yeah, Barry, hopefully I hope that answered your question. Now, when it comes to the movies, because you said you watch the movies more than the books, maybe, what is maybe some of your favorite movies that were made from his books and TV series or whatever?
My all-time favorite, of course, that started this whole thing between us, was It. That is my favorite. And one of the reasons is because so many people absolutely hate clowns, something as simple as a clown. So he was able to get into everybody's mind. I personally don't mind him that much. I like him because of the way they affect everyone. So I like Pennywise. He's my favorite character. And I go around quoting that movie all the time. That's one thing I do. I have all these quotes from Stephen King's movie, and when I tell people we all float down here, I get a very odd look. Just because we're in the western part of Colorado and it's real dry, they kind of try to make a connection, but it doesn't always work. But Silver Bullet is another favorite. Back when Gary Busey still acted. And yeah, Salem's Lot, which I've been looking for, and I found out yesterday when my daughter came over that she actually has it. So she brought it over. I get to watch that this afternoon because I couldn't find it anywhere.
Oh, fantastic.
I haven't seen it in forever. But Cujo and The Mist, I really like The Mist, and a lot of the actors in The Mist are in The Walking Dead.
Now, did you like the ending of The Mist?
Yes, because it kind of shows, even in everyday life, quite often people make a decision, or we're quick to make a decision that's life-changing, when if we could hold off just one more day or one more week, I mean, a year from now, we're not going to be worrying about the same things we worried about today. They're not even going to be important. And here this poor guy made this decision and gets out of that car, and in a matter of seconds, the entire environment, story, everything changed completely. And it was too late for him to take back what he'd done. So that hits home. So I did. I liked the ending.
A lot of people had an issue with the ending of The Mist. The way you make it sound, the way you described it, you know what? I didn't even really think about it that way because I really didn't like the ending of The Mist because I'd read the short story was on. I kind of like once again, I'm going to use the word ambiguousness of the ending because the ending of the novella has them just journeying into the mist, and that's how it ends. You don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
You don't know what they're going to run into, whatever. But now that you think of, you mentioned that is actually makes a lot of sense actually, and that might have been.
It comes with age, Dylan. It comes with age.
And that might have been one of the reasons why a lot of people did not like that because it was such a horrendous ending, being not the way it was acted, but just the occurrence where he does what he does. It's horrible for everybody to see that because a lot of people think that they could never do that, but you know what? You never know what you're capable of in a situation of high stress and you might be thinking at the same time that he did it because he didn't want his family to suffer or whatever.
Yeah, at the same time, do we fight until the very end? Isn't that fight or flight? Like Walking Dead, for instance. Do you just give up when you're ambushed, or do you figure out a way to fight? And I think that's why people love it so much, because the people that are still on there have fought through everything, and that's kind of the thing in that movie. He did that instead of, which is worse, them getting eaten by all those monsters, or him shooting them. So, I mean, what a decision.
So, any other films out there that you enjoy of the Stephen King books?
Oh, I enjoy pretty much all of them. I like Langoliers. I'm not sure why. And I can't remember the name of the one with the guy, he would fly around. Was he a vampire?
Oh, yeah, Night Flyer.
Yeah, I enjoyed that.
Fantastic. Love the Night Flyer. Yeah, the Langoliers, I like that one too. And I think it has to do with the idea that you're in between time. It's you entered this time portal and there's nobody else around but you. But you're in between the seconds almost, and it's one of these really one of these really cool ideas that there's no time now because you're in between the seconds, and if you do not escape quickly, you're going to be eaten by the Langoliers, which are the beings that come out and destroy these rips in time and stuff like that. It was a good cast. It was a low-key story. It was a TV miniseries, another 2-night miniseries. Good cast. David Morse, Dean Stockwell are the two that jump out to me right now, and the guy who was on Perfect Strangers, Bronson Pinchot, was those are the three that I remember most about that show. And then Night Flyer, I highly recommend everybody go out and see Night Flyer. It's one that went under the radar. It might have even gone direct to DVD. I don't even know if it went out in the movie theaters.
I don't either.
Miguel Ferrer is one of my favorite actors of all time. Loved him in Twin Peaks and RoboCop and all kinds of stuff. And I love his acting. And he basically he's the lead in that film, and he plays the role that he does. He's a jerk, and it's an interesting story about a vampire who flies an airplane, and he flies at night, and then he lands and he doesn't go to like international airports. He goes to little podunk local airports, and he lands there, and they give him clearance to just sit there. So he sits during the daytime to do his sleep, and then at night he comes out. And he's got that, even though he's one of the ugly vampires, one of the grotesque, big mouth, stuff like that. He's got that that charisma, that charismatic power that you go up to somebody and you look at him and you don't see the grotesqueness. You see, this hot, handsome guy, or just this, because he goes after women mostly, I think. It's these charming, nice, guys, and he's able to feed on these people willingly because they will do pretty much anything he tells them to do because he's got them under their spell. And then he has every right that, if someone discovers him, he'll turn vicious in a second and he will totally shred them, And then he just goes on to the next one. And there really is no way to follow him, and because I think he gives like maybe a fake landing code or whatever, but one that still works out because
they can never catch him.
Yeah, he uses his charisma like that, and so Miguel's character is a reporter for like a World Weekly News type of one of those supermarket tabloids where they talk about ghosts and Loch Ness monsters and Bigfoots and stuff like that, and he wants to be taken seriously as a investigative journalist, so he jumps on the story. He's a pilot himself, so he flies to these places, interviews the people, and discovers the story. And the ending is absolutely perfect. I'm not going to ruin it, but I love the ending, and it doesn't end well. I mean, that's one of the endings I actually absolutely love. Is it doesn't end well for the main character, is what I meant. It's such a great, and it makes absolute sense because he's such a jerk. And what happens to him at the end of the movie is almost karmic, almost that's what's supposed to happen because he is such a jerk, and he's getting taken down for that now. So that's a Night Flyer's another good one. As I said, the first couple that got me were his really non-horror ones. Stand By Me, great cast in that one. River Phoenix, Will Wheaton, Jerry O'Connell, Corey Feldman. Richard Dreyfuss as the grown-up Will Wheaton's character telling the story. Kiefer Sutherland's in it. Rob Reiner directed it. He was coming off of, I think, Princess Bride, so he did that. It's such a great movie. And my sister still says to this day that I look like young Will Wheaton in that film, and I kind of do, because I was about Will Wheaton's age when it came out, and I had that similar gangly type of pale look to me about it as well. And then Misery.
And the thing about the movie you were just talking about, Stand By Me, was that group of kids, and I always compared them to the kids in It. That was one thing that kind of attracted me to that movie. So sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's okay. No, that's fine. I mean, if that's what we do. If you have something to add to the conversation, you add it. Misery, another Rob Reiner good one. Was, once again, not really one of like paranormal type of horror for Stephen King, more of a mental, physical thriller type of thing. Kathy Bates and James Caan just did a great play off of each other on that one. I mean, that's just a great casting, great film version of that. And then we get into the and those came out in like the late 80s. So then we get into the 90s when King decided to jump into the miniseries game, and the first one he did was It. And It is one of my favorites also. I mean, we talked about that as well. I found the cast was pretty spot on with the kids. I think they did an excellent job with casting of the kids. The best casting, of course, is still Pennywise. Tim Curry as Pennywise is the definitive evil clown. And I, like you say, everyone floats down here. I always say, I'm Pennywise, the dancing clown. I always say that for whatever reason. That's my favorite line. Just it's and it was one of those that I actually read. Did you read it? Or
yes.
All 1,100 pages of it.
Yeah, big ass book.
It is, but it's up there as one of his great ones because you get such a good description of the seven main characters, the kids, and then even get a good description of the bad guys, and you even get a pretty good description of Pennywise and all stuff as well. And I highly recommend, if you like the miniseries, in order to fit it into the 4-hour area, they had to excise and cut and slice and dice the book, and you need to check out the book. The book, yes, don't be daunted by the 1,100 page. It's worth it. It'll take you maybe a couple weeks to read if you do it. No, unless you read it at a faster pace than I did. It took me a couple weeks to read it, but I wasn't reading it every day, and I wasn't and I would read in bursts, so it wouldn't be like maybe 5 pages here. I'd read maybe like 30 to 40 pages at a time, maybe even more sometimes. Maybe even hitting the hundreds sometimes. But it's worth it because King builds such an interesting story in Derry, as it were, Derry, Maine, and you get an idea of what's going on in the city and what's happening with these kids, and then to contrast it with them as grown-ups and everything that they're dealing with as grown-ups, which is not as they're all highly successful, but something is drawing them back to Derry now, and it's this return of their nemesis, Pennywise, who is just perfectly well done by Tim Curry, one of the creepiest villains that you've ever seen on the screen, and he even comes out as really creepy in the book too. And whenever you read the book, just picture Tim Curry as Pennywise, it will freak you out even more. And then I think my all-time favorite, I think, is still The Stand, and I've read both the novel, the uncut extended version, and I watched the 8-hour miniseries. I have some slight issues with the miniseries, but to be honest, once again, they did a pretty good job of hitting, getting some good casting in that, getting the idea of the book down, and the theory of the good and the bad, and just the idea itself of a plague wipes out 99% of the Earth's population, leaving 1%, and then they're having dreams of either a demonic walking man or a 12-year-old woman in the cornfields of Nebraska, and there's good and the bad. So the bad are going to Vegas. The good are heading to this farm, but then they are going to be moving on to Boulder, Colorado. There's Colorado again.
Yeah.
And so you've got the bad guys in Vegas, obviously, which is makes sense, and then you've got the good guys in Boulder. And the interesting thing about that is that the bad guys in Vegas are not all entirely pure evil. They might have. You do have some people who've been in jail. Some of the bad guys. Some who've been in jails, the rapists, the killers, not the drug addicts, because Flag, who is the walking man, the walking dude, the guy who runs it, he doesn't stand for people who are drug addicts. So he kills them and use them. He wants to control the population, and he can't have drug addicts going in there screwing things up. He doesn't mind if you're like evil and beating up people and stuff like that, because he needs those, but at the same time, there are just people who either just have not bad attitudes, but just they might have like sort of shades of gray in them, and they could go either way, but it's just easier maybe to go to Vegas. So they're not all bad, and then everybody who's in Boulder, they're not all good either, So you get kind of those shades of gray characters. I mean, you have some that are really, really good. You have some that are really, really bad. But then you get the other characters that you have your shades of gray. And that's what's great about the extended edition of The Stand, is that you get it's probably King's biggest cast of characters. You get introduced to so many characters, and sometimes it is hard to remember who they are. You have your main characters, but then there's a whole bunch of other side stories that go on with some of these other characters, and that's what made it interesting, is that it's such a good story about good and evil that when you get near the end and it's building to this big final battle, you don't get it. You don't get the big final battle where they're both, the good and the bad armies, come out onto the warfield and they go after each other and kill each other. Because let's be honest, that's the cliched ending. That's what you're expecting to see. Mm-hmm. King decided to go a different way, and for that I applaud him. I kind of like how he basically ends the book about 300 pages before the book's actually over, and then the remaining 300 pages is the journey of two of the good guys heading back to Boulder and dealing with the aftermath of what's going on after the bad guys have been defeated by, of all things, an act of God, which is just interesting, and it's a good look at religion. It's a good look at things, and you know what? It's not the last you see of Flag, because he appears in the Dark Tower saga, doesn't he?
Yep. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So he's one of those bad guys that he's like a bad penny. He's so bad that he can escape, and he comes back and gets, I guess, the explosion ripped him into the alternate dimension where the Dark Tower is. So yeah, got him in there. And then as I said, I love the miniseries. It was an 8-hour miniseries. It was, I believe, it was maybe at '94, because I was at college, and me and a couple of friends, including Eric Anow, who is a Snark Aleck with us, we would sit down in our common area and we'd watch The Stand. The 2 hours. It was 4 days, 2 hours, and we all loved it. I mean, I had some issues with some of the casting, but all in all, they got the gist of the story down. They hit all the right marks. And once again, we were talking about Miguel Ferrer. He's in that too. He does a great job as the right-hand man of the Walking Dude, who you find in a jail cell, but he ends up having sort of a crisis of confidence in his leader once he sees things starting to fall apart. But he has such devotion to him that he sticks with him, even though he knows that it's probably not the right course of action. And you actually see a little bit of his character change in that. And Miguel Ferrer just did a really good job of bringing that out. It's in the book, and then he also brings that really well in the series, in the miniseries as well. So yeah, there's good. So those are some of my favorites. Of course, the Darabont ones, Shawshank is good. Green Mile, which is another, which I told you we already talked about, reading it and then seeing the movie, I thought was a pretty good version of that. The Mist, once again, I still might have issues with the ending, but the way you described it, it gives me maybe a different way to look at it now. But yeah, I mean, there's a ton of stuff. I think mostly they get when the movies that are made of his books, they mostly get the feeling right. In some cases, maybe not, but they do tend to get the idea down, and it makes for an enjoyable film.
Right.
And yes, Barry, we talked about Silver Bullet. It's one of Cindy's favorites, and actually I liked it too. It's one of those that slides under the you don't really think much about that as one of the Stephen King movies, but it is. It's right. One of the good ones out there. And we touched on Lawnmower Man a little bit. It's just one of those crazy ones that he did from one of his short stories. Anything else you want to talk about, Mr. King? No?
No. We've covered a lot, I think.
Yeah, I think we did too.
It can lead to so much, and again, not just the movies or stories, but anyone you're talking to, the memories they have of it or what was going on in their life. So that's why it's so interesting. Just leads from one thing to another story, and that's why I love him.
Yeah, and you know what? You just brought up a point. Bag of Bones was another one of the books that I really enjoyed of his, and when I was reading it, I was working for a radio station here in Baltimore, WLIF, and one of the DJs, the disc jockeys who was on the radio, she was reading it at the same time, And my job was we would do events where we'd go to like grocery stores and the DJs would come and talk to the audience and like that. So whenever we worked together, we would sit there and we'd just talk about Bag of Bones because we were both reading it around the same time. So when the people weren't, coming by or it was kind of slow or whatever, we would just sit there and just talk about Bag of Bones, which is really great. So yeah, you remember where you are. I remember reading The Stand. I was on vacation. My dad likes to drive everywhere. We flew out to Denver, Colorado. We drove up to Yellowstone and Grand Teton, and then drove back down to Boulder. And then we left from Denver also. So it was like a 10 to 12 day vacation. And my dad liked to do the driving. He didn't want to go from plane to plane to plane to plane like that. So I read The Stand while we were driving from Denver, Colorado, up to Yellowstone and Grand Teton. So it's a long drive.
Yeah.
So once again, it's a memory. Yeah, it's a memory that you said, and Stephen King just brings that out in me. I mean, there's that. I told you about The Stand. I watched it in college. The TV show I watched in college. Stuff like that. It is and the serialized version where I'd always go every week of the Green Mile. Every month I'd go get the new version of that too. So, and that's one of his strengths. The fact that he can write different genres and write them all very well. And also, he has no problem with selling the rights to his books and getting them made into movies. He might not always like everything that they do, but in the end, it's his stories. More people are seeing them. If they see the movie, they like the movie. Maybe that'll get them to buy his book.
Yep.
You never know. So I think we're going to end it there because we're almost to the end of our allotted time. Actually, believe it or not, that's awesome. So. I just got about 10 minutes left, so I'm just going to thank you again, Cindy, for pinch hitting today for us. It was a good conversation.
Thanks for having me. Enjoyed it.
We covered a lot of stuff, and so let me just hit my my things I need to do, and then we'll get out of here.
Okay.
Thanks, Barry, for being on the Q&A. And thanks everybody out there for watching. We had about 4 viewers up here, but that's sometimes misleading. Because sometimes we have more, sometimes we have less. But still, thank you all for watching. Snark Alec Radio is going to be on 9 o'clock on Thursday. So come listen to our grandfather radio show. They're the ones that got me started in this. We're both members of the Snark Alex. Group of people hang out on Twitter and just talk about pop culture and make fun of sci-fi films and TV shows, stuff like that. They've done a radio show, and Tony Solo, Kelly Toole, and Official Pagan Mike are doing the show every Thursday 9 p.m. So check them out. My next show is going to be on June 22nd, which is next Sunday. It'll be my Dylan Knows International show with a round table of people. We'll talk about the topics of the day. B. Bronwyn is my usual co-host there. We're going to have special guests Kelly Toole and Young Jeans, so they'll be on the show. We'll just talk about whatever. I'm still working stuff out, but the show might not be at 12:30 on Sunday. It might actually be a little later in the day. It might be closer to like 2:30. I'm going to work it out to see if Kelly and Young Jeans can move it into a later time because Bronwyn's got some things she has to do in the morning. So we'll try to move out there. So just keep watching my Twitter feed at Holodill, and I'll let you guys know the status of that. And then June 29th, which is the 5th Sunday in June, I'll be doing probably a Doctor Who show. So we'll talk about Doctor Who there. I've gotten into that and got people who are going to talk to me about that. So I think I hit everything. One more personal plug for me. My birthday is June 20th, this Friday, so please send money. I need the money very badly. So whatever. But thanks again for watching. Cindy, once again, thanks for hanging out with me today. And
thanks, Dylan.
Have a lovely Father's Day, everybody out there. Enjoy the weather if it's not too bad. And have a good week. Bye.
Have a good week and a happy birthday.
Thank you very much.